What's up, friends? I'm Jonathan Miller, and welcome back to Jonathan Miller Music, where we help each other become better artists. K-pop is currently entering its 5th generation with groups like Zero Base One and Rise, at least depending on who you ask. The point is, K-pop is definitely different from when I first became a fan well over a decade ago. I've seen its highs and lows as it went from an unknown thing outside of Asia to its global expansion and what it has become today. From fan culture to groups themselves, K-pop is most certainly not the same. So today, I wanted to do something a little different and share some K-pop opinions that have changed over time. Most of these are from my own personal observations and may not reflect how everyone feels, of course. I've even included some of my own opinions that have changed over time regarding certain aspects of K-pop. So take this video with a grain of salt because, as the title implies, this is largely going to be an opinion-based video and may not exactly reflect your personal experience with the genre and industry. If you'd like to share some of your opinions on anything regarding K-pop and how they might have changed over the course of your experience, feel free to do so in the comments. Subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of my content or future uploads. Leave a like so I know you enjoyed this video. And here are some K-pop opinions that have changed over time. Originally regarded as the 4th generation leaders, people's opinions on ITZY have drastically changed in the 4 years they've been active. As one of 4th gen K-pop's oldest girl groups, ITZY gained popularity right away, dropping the anthem Dala Dala, which celebrates being different and unique. The same sentiment was echoed in their subsequent comebacks for ITZY and Wannabe. However, this is where ITZY started to run into some issues. One of the defining characteristics of 4th generation K-pop is that it's the first group of artists to debut after K-pop became a well-known thing around the globe. New groups and new music were dropping faster than ever in an industry that was still trying to play catch-up from the streaming revolution and then getting shaken up again by the COVID-19 pandemic and TikTok. Sometimes I don't think people really understand just how different the music industry is and how rapidly it developed from 2010 to present day. But that's a video for another day. ITZY and Wannabe were hits, but initially fans got bored quite quickly with the I'm different theme, despite it literally being their concept. Pushing forward, ITZY kept dropping bops like Mafia in the Morning, Not Shy, and Loco, but general opinions on the group began to morph. Some said ITZY wasn't as innovative as other 4th gen groups. Some fans said songs like Sneakers and Boys Like You were boring or cringy. Some had issues with the members themselves, but mostly fans had an issue with JYP and his declining promotions for the group. It was shown that the group had a meal with JYP discussing that the members were worried about fans not liking them anymore, and following this, fans began to wonder when next we would get a comeback from ITZY as time ticked on. Fans sent protest trucks to JYP to give ITZY a comeback, which we ultimately got with Kill My Doubt and its 20 different versions. The point is, opinions on ITZY have been up and down. So here's my 2 cents as somebody who loves and adores ITZY. I sometimes wish people weren't so quick to write artists off nowadays. It's something I can't control, obviously, but I believe any artist can have a comeback at any time, at any age, unless they do something that's truly, truly awful and terrible. I will agree that JYP, or at least the division of JYP that ITZY is under, could be doing a little better listening to the members and listening to fans, aka buyers. Fans of ITZY are a little bit older now, and so is ITZY. They should be allowed to grow up a little bit and experiment with their sound a little bit more, just like every other K-pop group gets to. And what's nice about that is with songs like Bet On Me, they're finally starting to, or at least it seems that way. The problem is songs like Cake, which is a total bop, by the way, don't give the general public those sleek vibes that they want, especially in comparison to groups like IVE or LE SSERAFIM. ITZY is not old. ITZY is not yesterday's news. They don't need to retire. They are not has-beens like I've seen in some of these comment sections. Why are some of you trying to age people out of the music industry when they're 19 years old or whatever? They're young girls who still have the goods. And I think nowadays, the majority of people believe that, but like when they see a royal concept for ITZY, which they would absolutely kill, and then they do a 180 and get something like Sneakers, which was not that bad, okay? If I survived Vanessa Hudgens' Sneaker Night, you can survive ITZY's Sneakers. I will stand and die on this hill. It creates a lot of brand confusion. I know these comebacks are planned months, sometimes years in advance, and it should be noted that ITZY is evolving if you pay attention to this latest comeback. I just hope that people don't collectively decide that they're done for decisions that are outside of the members' control. I'm still rooting for them and hope others will too. And you can get your fans rooting for you with DistroKid. DistroKid is one of the leading and best music and video distribution platforms on the market, helping artists like you and me get our music up on places like Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Amazon, and more. For one small yearly price, you can distribute as much music as you can possibly create and put together and gain access to a whole bunch of other features that can help you grow, manage, and promote your music too. One such fantastic feature is making it super simple to get verified on Spotify. Getting that blue check mark on your artist profile is important, not only so your fans know for sure that it's you, but also so that in the future, the possibility of your music winding up accidentally on someone else's profile gets minimalized. To get verified, simply hit get access and follow the steps. It can take a day or two to process, but you should get linked up and verified pretty quickly. Once you're verified, you'll get access to Spotify for Artists, where you can see all sorts of cool things too. So use my special VIP link to save yourself 7% on your first year's membership with DistroKid. Link is in the description. If you watch my content, especially my deep dives, you know that on this channel, we celebrate all generations of music and K-pop, not just what's current and not the same music icons that always get content produced about them. But if I do, I usually have a particular reason for making those videos. The point is, history helps us appreciate what we have now. When I was first introduced to BoA as a kid by my Japanese friends, I just thought she was a J-pop star and didn't think much of it. Her music was teen pop, like what was popular here in the US at the time. The only difference being is she sang in Japanese. Since I grew up with the AAPI community, I didn't really see much of a difference between her and Britney Spears as a 10-year-old. Until many years later and getting educated, when BoA made her English debut while I was a junior in high school. Even then, I still didn't realize that this was the same girl my friends played on their MD players from my childhood. Like this video if you know what an MD player is in Japan. Anyway, this was the start of K-pop's electropop sound that went on to dominate the second generation. K-pop's unique twist on popular club-oriented sounds provided escapism to a generation plagued by the recession and global financial crises around the world. This would eventually move toward an EDM sound around 2013, which is when K-pop's now signature EDM/hip-hop fusion really began to develop. Electronic dance music dominated radio across the globe as the decade progressed, providing entertainment for young adults in the festival scene. However, music sound popularity is directly linked to the state of the world. Following Trump's inauguration in the US, music did a 180 and began to take on a darker psychedelic dreamlike atmosphere. In K-pop, however, this was less affected because of its rapid global expansion at the time. Third generation created several iconic bops and groups and helped establish K-pop outside of Korea and became even more experimental. When 2020 hit and the pandemic and TikTok came into play, K-pop went from its tried and true EDM pop hip-hop fusion into a more refined, softer R&B sound, or noise music, which is typically heard from boy groups. Noise music features shouting, fast rapping, blown out or fuzzy productions. It's typically very aggressive, whereas the R&B dominated sounds are much more refined and softer and tight in production. Sound evolution happens in music, but almost all sounds get reinvented and come back around. R&B pop was the dominating sound in music during the mid-2000s, right before BoA arrived on American shores. This is even reflected in K-pop at the time as well, with groups like Big Bang. People like what makes them feel comfortable and say something's dated if it doesn't feel like what they're used to. Luckily for K-pop, it's ever-changing. So don't get too used to R&B pop. You never know what might be the next musical trend coming around the corner. This is something that is almost entirely my own opinion, but there's a tiny part of me that will always feel like I owe Gen 3 K-pop a bit of an apology. I've never hated any one group, although as I've stated several times before, I was not a fan of TWICE initially, for several reasons as I stated in my opinion on TWICE video and in my deep dive on TWICE, which I will link in the description. But getting a little personal, Gen 3 happened at a really volatile time in my life, and I almost left K-pop entirely because of that volatility. I initially became a bona fide K-pop fan, aside from BoA, in 2012, right after EXO debuted. So initially, I was a bit of an SM stan, which largely remains kind of true, but nowadays I genuinely do love everybody. SM groups just hold a little special place in my heart for initially being such a burst of inspiration for me as a songwriter and artist. That's not a secret. It's even in my artist biography. The thing is, due to me being in my mid to late 20s and having a multitude of traumatic experiences happen to me that I had no tools to properly heal from, this caused me to be very reclusive and stuck in my ways. Music was changing, K-pop was expanding, and I got jealous that the artists that I loved weren't getting as much attention as, say, Blackpink, BTS, or Twice. Red Velvet will always be my babies for being the first new K-pop group to debut after I became a well-established K-pop fan, but I was so self-confined and stayed in my little box that I admittedly did not step out of as much as I wish I would have. I became very guarded as more and more things happened to me, and it all built up in my body that in 2020 I had a bit of a breaking point and had to seek help. Long story short, for another day, I began to heal the cracks in my heart, let's say. One crack in particular I was able to heal because of you guys. You guys started requesting my Kpop Opinions series, and my album deconstructions went viral on TikTok. So much so that I had no choice but to finally come out of my shell and grow. And you know what happened? I found new groups that I loved, new music that resonated with me. I went back through all the Gen 3 groups that I missed and learned their histories, discographies, and what made each of them unique. I felt bad for being so resistant because now I don't feel that way at all. And it's directly because of you guys that I was able to heal old wounds and now make the content that I make. Which is why, even when there's songs that I don't particularly love, I do try to find things that I enjoy about them. If it hadn't been for you and the luck that I had getting my content seen for the first time, I might still be a traumatized 31-year-old adult, not ready to go through a second puberty of sorts. Plus, new music leaves your mind open to new ideas and inspiration. If you keep your mind open to new sounds, or even going back through time to revisit old ones, you might just find a cool source of excitement and end up creating something new you never expected or thought that you would. Another opinion that's shifted for one reason or another is the general way people look at the big three companies in K-pop: YG, JYP, and SM. When I first got into K-pop, these were the companies you'd want to be at as an aspiring trainee, not only for their larger stake in the industry and potential career connections, but also because you typically got paid more upon debuting. As a fan, these three companies had a chokehold on fan culture and were directly responsible for some of the staples we know today. SM Entertainment put photo cards in DBSK and Girls' Generation's albums, which took off like wildfire and is now the reason you probably have a binder full of them. YG in particular is one of the reasons K-pop is so influenced by Black culture, as its CEO was a member of Seoultaejeon Boys, a group largely considered the pioneers of including hip-hop in K-pop songs. JYP housed Wonder Girls, the first K-pop act to really break through in the West, aside from the Kim sisters decades prior in the US. Being signed to a smaller agency wasn't a bad thing, of course. The big three were just very well established, but people like to root for the underdog. So when Big Hit launched BTS and BTS continued to grow in popularity over the years, even abroad, opinions began to shift. Social media and a generational focus shift in pop culture leveled the playing field and created more opportunities for smaller agencies to thrive. This has since led to a much less focus on the big three agencies. Bang Si-hyuk, founder of Big Hit Entertainment and longtime work partner of JYP himself, eventually grew his company into a giant conglomerate, which is why many people include HYBE now and say the Big Four. It makes sense considering HYBE artists are the ones dominating all of the charts right now, but some older fans feel the Big Three title was originally sort of a term of respect and have hesitations about saying the Big Four, despite HYBE's success. Rooting for the underdog has allowed tons of groups to find success, most recently being 50/50, whose song Cupid became a viral hit around the globe in 2023, in spite of ongoing legal battles still underway at the time of making this video. My personal take, as I've stated many times, is there's always room for more artists at the table. I like seeing everybody have a real shot, and both big agency and small agency artists succeeding. Watching people shift to disliking an artist simply because they're from YG, SM, or JYP is really strange strange to me, but that's not a sentiment unique to present day. You definitely had people like that when I first gotten into K-pop. It's just a little bit odd to see it more commonly than it used to be. To each their own, I guess. The last thing I want to talk about is the evolution of fan culture in regards to how people now measure success. Nowadays, people run to the charts on Billboard, Circle, or Spotify, or cite how many millions of views a music video got in its first 24 hours on YouTube to adamantly defend a group's perceived success or failure. There's very much a real push to get radio to not factor into the Billboard charts, for example, in spite of its intrinsic and historical grasp on the industry. Many young fans feel Spotify, or streaming numbers in general, paints a much better picture of what's actually popular. I've even had people in my own comment sections tell me that groups in the past were not successful because they didn't break a Guinness World Record or go number one. But this sort of sentiment was not always the case. Charts are really cool, and yes, you should celebrate if you get anywhere on them, but it's always important to ask about what's not being seen on any type of infographic. For example, chart certifications didn't start in Korea until around 2017, so of course TWICE has more chart certifications than, say, Girls' Generation. At the same time, Girls' Generation winning a YouTube Music Award in 2013 was considered a major breakthrough for K-pop 10 years ago, in the same way that Jimin and Jungkook getting a Billboard #1 is considered a massive breakthrough for K-pop. And if your first response to that comparison is that's apples to oranges, yeah, that's kind of the point, because earlier generations of K-pop didn't have the privilege of charting as frequently as they do now, because the chart rules have changed several times over the last decade. Bulk buying, for example, or buying multiple versions of an album, wasn't as common as it is today. You only really did it if you were like a collector or you loved the photo cards, but bulk buying had no effect outside of Korea, at least here in the US. I'm not gonna say it didn't happen, because of course it did, but now, however, bulk buying is so much more common amongst fans because chart success is how they can physically see that their favorite artist is succeeding or winning. So when older fans get group reunions like Girls' Generation's Forever One in 2022, a lot of newer K-pop stans, at least the ones on Twitter, could not understand why 10 to 20 million views in its first week was considered huge by Soans. Even if Forever One didn't go on to be the best-selling single of all time, Girls' Generation and groups like them can still be considered iconic and great, even if their latest track doesn't outsell their biggest hit or go #1. And somewhere long ways in the future, that same thing will probably happen to current icons like BTS, Blackpink, TWICE, and more, because their success of a certain generation is not going to hold the same impact to younger people who did not grow up with them. But that doesn't stop them from being iconic even in the future. It's been intriguing to watch fans go from defining success as just a popular song that literally everyone knows and loves, to some feeling a hit is only defined if it's viral, sells well, and breaks records. I think sometimes that's too strict of a definition and ends up setting more artists up for failure and sets up fans to be disappointed. On the flip side, however, when you have several examples of a group doing those things every comeback, I can see why some fans would think that that should be the standard. I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm an independent artist, but I personally think that success can be defined as much more than a chart number or YouTube view count. What do you think though? Do you have any K-pop opinions that have changed, or are there ones that you notice have changed from the general public? Should I do a part 2 to this video in the future? Let me know in the comments. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe so you don't miss my next upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.